If you've never heard of Iridology, or you're skeptical, this is the video for you. These are the eyes of Ogenus Wonderplanets. This is the right one, this is the left, same down here. Now, you can see here, this is from before 2009, this is from after, and you can see a hint at what the change was. If we zoom in a little more, do you see the difference in colour? That's a beautiful, nice blue, and then flared, fused, greyish tissue throughout both eyes. And there's also an increase in these brown spots that you see around the side. So let's talk a bit more about what caused these and the story behind it. So we're going to go back to February 9th 2009, and you can see in this screenshot it's an interview between Ogenus and the host who ran Superhuman Radio. And in this is a famous quote from Ogenus himself, that is the only way that a human being can get a bird flu or a swine flu is if it is injected in them. Now, there will be separate videos made, and what am I saying? There will be other videos made about that topic, but for now we're going to focus on iridology. Now, it's important that I tell you for this story that there were meant to be almost 300 million doses of swine flu vaccine that were produced in 2009. And because of this radio show that Ogenus did, only about 6 million of those 276 million were actually given, which would have pissed off a lot of people. So then, moving forward a little bit more in time, on April 2nd, in a very nice hotel in a relatively small town in the Philippines, Ogenus woke up abruptly to two large men pushing his shoulders into the bed as he struggled to sit up. There was enough light passing through the hotel windows that they weren't Filipino but rather Americans, and they were quite stunned he'd actually woken up. So he felt a pain in his arm, and he glanced and he saw a needle hanging from his arm, and there was a cloth placed over his face which knocked him out in a split second, much quicker than any anaesthetic that he'd had previously in his life for surgeries and whatnot. He says it was odourless, and that he fell unconscious very quickly, and he watched as the last guy injected another hypodermic into his arm. But we're going to get back to that later. So, this is an extract from a personal letter that was answering one of Ogenus's clients when he was asked about what iridology is. It's not a mainstream science, and you're definitely going to find a lot of information saying that it does not work, and there's even been scientific studies done where iridologists could not consistently find issues more than 50% of the time, which was just down to chance. But Ogenus found that present-day iridology lacks many aspects, and so he spent almost 2 decades, or just over 2 decades, studying it before he wrote his first book. He does say that he saw some visual manifestations that other people couldn't see, but he wasn't the only person who could see them, so it's not, and he says it himself, that it's not entirely psychic. So over here, we're going back to these photos. This is the left eye, this is also the left eye, and here's a quote from Ogenus in one of his newsletters from 2012. You can see it's from the same eye. He did not take any photos after 2007 until 2012. However, you can see all the flared and fused greyish white tissue outside the inner circle of the pupil. And what that indicates over here, if I zoom in for you, all of this stuff here shows mass scarring, cell death, and it was a reduction, I think, of 7% cellular life. Well, actually, no, it wasn't. No, it was a 14% decrease, which takes 7 years to reverse that damage, because Ogenus found that the primal diet that he created, that he discovered, reversed 2% of the body's damage, or healed the body 2% every year. And so his life was 87%, which was excellent, and down to 73 afterwards, which was still much greater than most people at that age, but it's a terrifying decrease from just 3 injections. And you can see the differences. One other thing that I have not actually written, but I'd like to mention, is if I zoom in again for you. Do you see the lack of a dark dot in this area here, sort of in these fibres? And then if I move down, it's the same eye, and you can see in those same white fibres, there's a black dot, and black is mercury in the eye. This is also a consult that's on ogenus.net, which I'll link in the description along with some other links. and this is actual photos that Ogenus consulted with, and you can see how much he had to say about it, which is pretty amazing. So there you go. Now over here I've made a family tree. This is my family, my mother, my father, my sister, myself, and their parents, so father, mother, mother of my dad. And so you can see that everyone's eyes are very different. I'm going to explain a couple of the signs just to give you a sort of hint at how iridology works in the Ogenus system. So this is my grandfather. He's had acid reflux for many years, and you can see how the gut and the stomach area around here is very orange. However, that's not actually the sign for acid reflux for an overacidic stomach. If you zoom in further, do you see this slight white halo that my mouse is going over? So that shows a very overacidic stomach, which has probably been broken down because it's been overacidic for so long. And in the other eye, you don't see it quite as much because of the broken fibres, and you can only see the colours on top of the fibres. So if you've got a dark lesion, this isn't a lesion, but if you've got a very dark lesion like this, you can't see what toxins are inside of it because there's no fibres to present the colour on top of. Now, this is also a dark marking, which would indicate mercury, usually, in the stomach and possibly in the transverse colon, which could be causative as well. This is my grandma. She generally doesn't do well with cooked fats or just fatty foods in general. And this is the right eye. This is the liver area, which seems quite scarred. And also you can see the brokenness of the fibres and some of these spokes coming out, which indicates IBS. Then this one's curious. This is my grandma on the other side of the family, and you would say, why are the two eyes different? And I didn't suspect why for quite a while. But what I discovered eventually is that this is due to glaucoma eye drops darken the iris over several years. But I can tell you that she's had gallbladder issues, and the gallbladder is represented by just about that spot there and this area here. The liver you can't see the liver very much because it's just completely caked over in this dark brown. You can see a mercury deposit up here around the shoulder or the neck. And that's about everything I'll say for hers today. This is my mother. She's got a very good constitution, as you can see, or quite blue constitution. She's got a lot of this orange around the gut area just from processed and cooked foods for the most part. This is an interesting one. Have you ever seen this before? This is my father. He has occasional acid reflux, indigestion, heartburn, those sorts of symptoms. And you can see a very distinct white halo around the stomach area. And interestingly enough, this orange discoloration mostly stays within the stomach ring and does not go out into the gut, which you would see on some people. It does a little bit on this side. He also had, if I go down here, he also had gout in one knee, which you can sort of see due to some of this brokenness here. And then lastly, this, I know the most about this one because that's myself. This is my sister, so you can see an example of how an older and a 3-year younger sibling can look very different. Okay, so I have a pretty good constitution, but I've got a lot more of these transversal fibres, like this one here in the bladder area, which indicates mutations or underdevelopment in an area from gestation or toxins passed through the mother. Whereas you don't see quite as many in this eye, and it's also a bit of a darker, nicer blue colour. There's a bit more scarring in the nervous system on this one, which is quite pronounced because you can see this white tissue all around the nerve wreath. I've also got, probably my earliest thing with the iridology was this lesion here is the mid sort of back muscles, which I've always had very weak back muscles. My deadlift was always weaker than my squat, as opposed to everyone else having a stronger deadlift than their squat when I used to go to the gym regularly. So that's just a couple proofs of iridology and how it lines up to people's symptoms, but we're going to go back to Ogenus. So he's been injected, he's fallen back asleep, and he's woken up, and it was not a bad dream. He was actually injected with these things, and he's suffering terrible symptoms. He's passing out, he's throwing up every 20 minutes and everything like that. And he decided that the only way he was going to live was to find a rotten stingray or a rotten shark, because it doubles in ammonia every hour as long as it's unrefrigerated, according to him. So eventually, at the second sort of dock, he found the stingray that he needed, and the woman wouldn't even cut it because it would just contaminate her board with ammonia and it would stink forever. So he got his own chopping board, as you can see, and it burned his throat, but he ate it bit by bit and followed it with coconut water just to stop it from continuing to burn the throat. And so he continued to sustain himself. His idea is that he protected his bloodstream with the ammonia, and it would bind with a mass amount of very poisonous toxins in his bloodstream and stop him from actually dying during this. And so he's started to get all of these horrible looking, different coloured pimples, warts, eruptions basically on the skin. And he describes a little bit about that here. So within 48 hours they took several forms. They were all quite small, and there was about 30 of them in the first 48 hours. Some were itchy and could be scratched off. Some had different fluids that turned crystalline. Some bled. Some were grey, greyish yellow, light amber. And he had a magnifying glass with him, so just so he could examine them, or so he could examine anything that he needed to. And he had a miniature microscope, so he said that they were crystalline and almost smooth edged, as if they were moulded into alluvial shaped plastic. So that's a little bit from Ogenus. And so I'll just finish here that this is Ogenus in 2001 at the Cancer Control Society. He looked excellent in this photo and in this one too. Sort of very nice blood-filled skin, very healthy hair. Looks very good. And then you can see over here in his later days after the injections, a lot of greying of the hair. This was just, he didn't. I don't think he lost the hair, but he got a haircut, and it certainly pronounced his facial features a lot more. His skin definitely looked a bit drier, and he got a lot more wrinkles on his face after this. And so just to finish there, I'll zoom out so you can see everything. Just to finish, of course he did survive, and he did go on to live a few more years. Yeah, I hope that helped you, and if you want Iridology, I am learning it. I've had 30-40 clients, so if that's something you want, check the links in the description.